Artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things. We hear all these buzzwords, but what does it really mean? Today, I'm going to focus simply on artificial intelligence. We're going to strip away all the other terminology. Artificial intelligence, what is it doing? We hear a lot about a zero-sum game of man versus machine, that humans will be replaced with automation. But is that what artificial intelligence is? In the book, Prediction Machine, the argument is that artificial intelligence is going to bring us cheap predictions, just as computers brought us cheap mathematics. What does a cheap prediction mean? If we think of something that we probably all have some knowledge of, is cancer screening. Right now, screening causes a lot of false positives, so we need to have biopsies. What if we can make that prediction better? Is that impact going to be on the prediction making, on the risk mitigation? In the book, they argue that the impact we'll see is not actually on the actual portion that we make the prediction in, but in the risk mitigation. And they compare it to biopsies and airport lounges. Who's ever missed a flight? You have not spent too much time in airports. If you've never missed a flight, you've spent too much time in airports, and if we have better predictions, do we need airport lounges? Airport lounges are a risk mitigation tool to being early for flights. In HR, if we're able to make better predictions at the beginning, what does that mean for the risk mitigation processes we use throughout the employee life cycle? So we're talking about artificial intelligence. Who thinks of like the Terminator, Sophia, humanoid robots? We kind of need to strip that away because we have a lovely one here. But what's really interesting is what's happening inside. Artificial intelligence is the rise of a soft emerging technology. It's not the physical hard part we're looking at. It can be confusing because we have a lot of definitions. Most definitions refer to machines and some form of intelligence. And we have to remember our intelligence is just one type of intelligence. There's lots of different types of intelligence out there that we can replicate or attempt to replicate. In artificial intelligence, the idea of artificial general intelligence, a program or a machine that can learn situation to situation to situation, though is being researched, there hasn't been a lot of movement. Where we see a lot of movement is in narrow applications, things that do one thing really well. And when we take it out of that situation, it's probably going to need help to learn again. A great example is chatbots. You can buy a semi-off-the-shelf chatbot that probably knows recruitment conversations fairly well. They'll need to be trained in your company's language and information. But if we took that chatbot and plunked it into customer service all of a sudden, it would probably struggle with the language. And we need to think about the new context that it's existing in. So what we're seeing is a rise in narrow applications. And we see a quick timeline. We can see the growth and the projected growth of narrow applications on the bottom. And we see our friend Sophia on the top. And she was first kind of shown as this general artificial intelligence, but inside she's a lot of different narrow applications working very well together. When I look at artificial intelligence for my research, there's a lot of different models out there. If you Google it, you can find tons of different organizations of the types of technologies people include or don't include, because there's no singular thing that we know as artificial intelligence. It's a concept more than anything. When I do my research, I need to find one of these technologies, one of these boxes to tick. And that's what I include in what I understand as artificial intelligence. So why are we seeing the rise of AI at this point? We hear a lot of comments about improved computer power, improved data, algorithms, and of course money. But we're also seeing something very interesting right now. From research and development all the way through, we're now kind of coming to the end of the technology life cycle. And we're at the point where we're starting to see market forces. The market forces have something very interesting. We have a challenge. we have a loss of productivity. And it's interesting, there's a lot of arguments. Is this productivity truly lost? Are we just not measuring it correctly? Has it changed? But in reality, if we go back to the Industrial Revolution, there was the same issue. And it took nearly a generation and a new group to come in and go, hey, we can use this technology differently. So right now, we're seeing a very interesting time where consumers are going to start dictating what type of technologies they actually want to use. So this is a bit of a confusing model, but you can start to place yourself on it. On the top line, it's looking at enabling technologies. So technologies that help us work better as humans, and on the bottom, replacing technologies. We can think of that as automating jobs or automating tasks. As time passes, those that are on the front end of that, on the early adoption end, leaders, are pushing the frontier boundary of technology, doing new things with it. In that, they're creating a competitive advantage. Behind them is the majority, and behind that, when you're behind the majority, you're now adopting technology as a basic need. So think about that business that's still struggling with email, for example, or is still using Excel spreadsheets to track their applicants. There we go. So one of the big questions I get, is it time to invest? And that's a great question. What right now seems like something fun is quickly becoming an expectation. One example, if you're thinking about candidates searching jobs in your job bank, and they have to go through and search, Boolean search for jobs. That's very traditional. Everybody is basically using that right now. What about candidate career discovery? There's now more products coming out and more businesses using products that you can upload your resume, and it lets the candidate know what jobs they match to. And then they can start doing their career search that way instead. At first, it will be fun and interesting on a few sites, but as more people adopt it, we need to start thinking about our own competitors. When a candidate has gone through 5 companies that they're able to upload their resume, best matching jobs are presented to them, and they get to a new website where they now have to search using Boolean search, they're probably going to get frustrated a lot faster. So it's always interesting, when will that shift happen? So we're going to take a couple of different looks at the market. And when we're taking these looks, each one may feel slightly different than the other, but they're all looking at the same thing, so hopefully one of them will resonate with you. One of the first ways I modeled the market was looking at global responsiveness, so being able to do everything end-to-end in the employee lifecycle, all the way to one singular application. And when I modeled the market that way, it became very apparent what was happening. Our global market isn't moving that much at the moment, but if you go all the way down to the local responsiveness, we see the emergence and the bubble of artificial intelligence growing. And these are applications that do one thing or a few things very, very well. Flipping that model around, and we look at what are those applications doing really well. We see the majority are in the talent acquisition space, but learning development, employee engagement, HR management, all the other areas are growing quickly. And then we flip it around again. What actual technologies are being used to do this well? We find the biggest growth in matching, personalizations, personalized and specific recommendations. So if you think about that in your Amazon shopping experience, or if we think about it, candidate matching, helping us sort out which ones, or recommending what are the top ones that we should be contacting right away. From there, it narrows down to some of the most interesting in the other category. This is where we're seeing the behavioral analysis. It's the smallest area, but interestingly, in research from last year that asked 2,400 HR professionals what they wanted artificial intelligence to do, that was the #1 area. So there's a bit of a mismatch there to expectations to reality. For consumers, it can be difficult. There's this huge group of technologies, but how can we use them and how can we make them meaningful now or understand the market or what they're doing? Research from about 2 years ago looked at the market and decided that there was roughly 3 things that artificial intelligence was doing. A product will traditionally likely not sit in one of these areas, but will actually share more than one or sometimes all 3. So of course, the biggest area is automation. That can be a blurred area because automation has been here for quite some time. What we're seeing is the rise of more RPAs and better integrations, but more interestingly, automation 2.0. An example will be an early screening bot that can go out to candidates and ask them about missing skills in their resume and help fill in the information so that when the recruiter gets to them, they don't need to ask those basic questions. Cognitive insights. This is a very interesting area because it was the most rapid growth area between 2017 and 2019. So this is where we get the idea of making predictions, recommendations, matches. And then when we start combining that with automation, it can start to become very powerful for us. And then the other area is cognitive engagement. That's normally around NLP. And we traditionally think of that as a chatbot. But NLP is working in other ways as well, helping us search better. Has anybody noticed a change in their Google search results in the last few weeks? Have they gotten better? They went down. They should start to get better. It's because Google has now put more NLP into their search engine. So it should technically start bringing back better results. So what does a cognitive insight look like? If you want to know more about me, this is from 3 different products, not mentioned. They work by scanning your LinkedIn profile. I found it was really interesting because the 2 outside ones said that I was a collaborator. I must have been in a really good mood the day I wrote my LinkedIn profile. We ran some tests with some of these products, and we asked people, how do they feel about the results? And very similar to what Google knows about us. You can go in and see what Google knows about you. Some people found it eerily accurate, and other people hummed and hawed a little bit. In the center one, I did find that my skills that were identified from my LinkedIn profile were fairly accurate and even included ones that I wouldn't have thought of myself. And when we think about NLP, and we think about being able to do text analysis, what does that mean for HR? We're going from a Likert scale to understanding free text and the emotions and the message that people are writing behind the words. It's not specifically the words they wrote, but what are the feelings? Does anyone here use Grammarly? My best friend. How do you feel about it when the message pops up, especially on Gmail, that says the emotion of your email? I now take emails out of Outlook and transfer it into Gmail just to see my emotion, to put it back now, especially when I'm angry. Make sure at least it's neutral and professional, right? These types of insights are fantastic. But one of the challenges we're now facing is, what do we do with them? In business and in HR, we're not always as insightful as we want to be. And we can start to see things if we go back. So we understand this about Megan, that I'm a collaborator. What could that do for you during the recruitment process? It should definitely not be a reason to eliminate a person, but it could help you identify somebody who needs to work more closely with difficult teams, perhaps. I love the little panda. So there's amazing technology out there. It's doing so much for us. And we're definitely running into some challenges implementing it, and really bringing out robust recruitment and HR practices, but we're in the early stages. That means we have time to pause. I encourage you to take a moment to read the short story of the lottery. It came out around the 40s, and it was published in the New Yorker, and it caused an uproar. It's a very dark story, but when you do your PhD, you're in a dark place. It highlights, though, the challenge of group thinking when it comes to ethics. And if you're thinking about ethics within your own organization, realize that the group mentality will blur some of the lines. Ethic guidelines have been starting to come out now. The US just recently released theirs. Other ones have been there, and there's some topics that we really need to think about. There's some very obvious ones, of course: data privacy, accountability, explainability, and transparency. But one that's we really need to think about, especially in recruitment, is effectiveness and misuse. How does the product actually work? And I'm not talking about the technology. You have technology experts to help you with that. As HR professionals, we need to be thinking about the science it's based on. The same way as if you're already selecting a psychometrics tool, you would be looking at the research behind it. You would need to do the same thing when you're looking at products. What is the science they're using behind it? What type of interviewing techniques? What type of psychometrics, etc.? And I implore everybody here to go to the products today and ask them tough questions about what they do, because they all do something very interesting, and they can all explain it to you in a way and probably provide you with research that they base it on. The other issue is understanding what happens to those insights after it's left our hands. As a recruiter or a recruitment department or an agency, you've developed all these amazing insights and a profile about a person. And then you hand it over to someone else. We need to think about what's going to happen with that. One example is the ability to predict churn. And it can be very positive. On the one side, as recruiters, we can start understanding who's about to churn from a company as a passive candidate that we can approach and is more likely to convert. However, in an internal process, what would happen if we knew someone was about to leave? The intention is that we'd have a manager intervene, provide them with an off-cycle pay rise, give them a new stretch assignment, et cetera, et cetera. What about the manager that goes, don't really like that guy anyways? And they start to continuously push them out the door. So in part of deploying artificial intelligence and predictions into our systems, we need to think beyond just the first step of what we get from the insights, but who else is going to be using it, and what are the potential misuses. We have an opportunity with artificial intelligence. The biggest thing is that we can collect more data than ever and analyze more data than ever. And if you think about it, it's not just about your data that's being collected, but the insights gained from the data that's being collected. And it can be very handy if you think about it in terms of advertisement. You're now having to do less work for product discovery. Products on Facebook are geared towards what you like already. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? HR has a duty, though, particularly in recruitment. We need to make sure that we're thinking about the science behind what we're doing, and that includes the limitations. But we also need to think about what's happening beyond that. Who else is using this insights, and how do we make it part of an evidence-based decision-making process? Do insights gained about behavior end at recruitment? Can they be used further down the line? The biggest thing is that HR end-to-end HR, including recruitment, including learning and development, we are responsible for mitigating the relationship between the organization and employees. And part of that responsibility includes thinking about the ethical and the direct impact new processes, new technologies are going to have. And we need to make sure we're part of the conversation. The biggest thing is if you're here today, you're obviously on that front edge of emerging technology, and you're starting to push the boundaries. It's not always about what you can save with new technologies, but how you can create a competitive advantage to gain the talent that your organization needs to complete the strategy that they're targeting. And we need to remember, it's not about man versus machine in a zero-sum replacement game, but the future of HR, the future of business, is augmented. It's about how we can work better together and do more with the information we have and go from the information age to the knowledge age. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you're really telling us that the candidate will start with Boolean as well in the future, using the Booleans to find the jobs, and now we are using the Booleans to find the candidates. It's going to be
passive candidate searching.
The opposite way, yeah. So let me see if there are questions for Megan in the app. There is. Can AI replace the recruiter already? Somebody wants to leave the job. That's what we found.
I could have a robot to replace myself. I would love it. Technically, you could, but legally and ethically and in reality of wanting the best possible candidate, there will always need to be a human in the loop. Regardless of how good a process is, there's always governance. There's a great kind of insider story about two products being released full force into an organization in the Middle East. Luckily, someone did governance at the end, and they discovered all the candidates were perfect white males from Western countries. So we definitely need to, as HR professionals, this is a new technology, we need to be governing and we need to be part of the process. And if you think about it, when you pick up your mail, the whole process is a lot of machines, and at the end you still have a human that's looking at it to make sure it's right and making sure that they're handing it to the correct person. There are things that the machines can't do, and whether they can do it in the future or not is definitely up for debate. But I think that is humans and our ability to get around things and understand the problems is going to be critical for technology to work well.
Yes, indeed. All right. How come talent acquisition is the biggest HR area in which AI is used? Interesting question.
This has been an interesting area. I found that too when I first started this research. I was curious as to why recruitment was the biggest area. There was a lot of comments as to recruiters don't do a good job, whether that's true or not. That it's administrative heavy, so it's easier to automate and replace, or it's an expensive process and the business needs to get that right because it helps the rest of the process improve. And if we can fix the beginning, fixing issues in the beginning is low-hanging fruit, and if we can fix that, then we're having less problems later on. And then if you think about it in an organization of 40,000 people, if you can reduce first-year churn, you're probably saving 4 to 10 million right there. So I think the reality is why recruitment is the biggest bang for your buck.
What do you think of the Amazon case of biased hiring algorithm?
What do I think? I think it highlights, first off, it's an old example. It was early work. One of the challenges of working with a data scientist as well, I work with one right now, and we had an argument about a paper, and it was looking at predicting churn in sub-Saharan Africa for doctors. And the argument came from the paper was that we could take a certain amount of data and make a prediction about who is going to churn, but in reality, we actually needed to talk to each person, understand why they left. The data scientist said to me, nope, I don't need to talk to any of those people. If I have enough data, I can make a good prediction. That irked every social scientist bone in my body, because I still believe that humans are not predictable because we can or cannot do things, even though we have the potential to do it. And we need to be careful with that in making predictions. And that idea of handing it completely over a bot to recruit for us is the same thing. We need to be thinking, because we have more information and more context about what's going on, and humans are much more complex than a few data points.
Thanks so much. Please, a warm applause for you. Thanks.